get sick if you drink that water. Red blues. Red blues. Red blues. Baby, red blues. Every kind of people got every kind of blues, but a red man's got red blues.
Red blues. Sego, it is December 11th, Monday, December 11th. Welcome to Let's Talk Native on the LTN Radio Network. This program breaks all the rules for Native radio. No buffalo speeches, no mystic healing, no special Indian prayers. We tackle the real issues facing Native people, look back at our glorious and our grave history, a tough look at where we are at now, and look forward to our ongoing battles for sovereignty and autonomy. Let's Talk Native is produced in association with Iroquois Promotions on the LTN Radio Network, streaming live from the Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation, and simulcast and rebroadcast on the Gwe, CKWE in Tendenega. You can find us also streaming live audio at www.ltnradionet.com. And, of course, we are Facebook Live. I know we've had some internet troubles over the last few weeks. Our signal isn't really good here, so we're making the best of what we got, and hopefully we can get through a program without too much of interruption. I am John Kane. I am your show's host and producer, and I'm joined in studio by Jake Proud, who's at the board running both our soundboard and our cameras for our Facebook live stream and for our YouTube channel, Let's Talk Native TV. So I want to thank Jake for sitting in, and I want to give a shout out to Kelly McMillan, our studio engineer, for our setup. And we've got a lonesome stranger come straggling in. We got Matt Hill, who is kind of dragging up a little bit, but he's not on camera, but he's on mic. So
I want to hiatus.
Yeah, he's not been. Yeah, he's taking vacation by going to work. I don't know. I don't know how that works.
I had to go to work because I needed a break.
Yeah, there you go. So anyway, but Matt's come in at least spend a few minutes with us today, and it's good because some of what I wanted to talk about today is related to. I mean, it's related to what Matt engages in terms of some of his Facebook posts and that kind of stuff. And even when Matt isn't in studio, oftentimes he's contributing to the show in other ways. So I thank him for that. And as per my post for this for the program, what I basically said is critical thinking seems to be in short supply, and we've talked about critical thinking on this program many times before, and because it ties directly to things like identity and how we evaluate our place in within, and I hate to say it, but within a dominant culture, a culture that, while not very refined, is pervasive, and it is pressed by everything from government to religion to economics to all kinds of things. So it leaves Native people in a place where we've referred to it as a cognitive dissonance, where we do things that we know we shouldn't. We justify our behaviors in ways that oftentimes are nonsense, and it leaves us struggling. It leaves us conflicted. And I would argue that some of that cognitive dissonance, some of that failure to apply critical thinking, means, first off, that we have to ignore our own common sense, and that can cause stress. And I would argue that stress caused by that cognitive dissonance and that lack of applying our own critical thinking has really contributed to many, everything from health issues to quality of life issues. And certainly, again, as per my post associated with the show, if you limit the application of critical thinking to your circumstance, the other thing that you do is you really diminish the possibility even of meaningful creativity. And when I say creativity, I mean having creative solutions to whether they're current problems or longstanding problems. Because let's face it, I mean, some of the things that have plagued Native people, especially since the landing of Europeans on our shores, is something we still have not reconciled. And I would argue that we've done more reconciliation to their culture than trying to assert our own, and I realize that some of that has been at our own peril sometimes in the future or in the past. I mean, but today there's no reason that we don't practice more of our philosophies and cultural understandings, apply what we've learned from history and culture and our language, and yet we don't. Now,
What would you say it would be in art forms?
well, I think art forms is a great place to demonstrate a certain level of creativity, but usually art demonstrates the circumstance, not the solution. So when I'm talking about creativity, I'm talking about coming up with creative solutions to problems. I agree with you. The first problem is recognizing that's the problem, and I think artists oftentimes are on the leading edge of that. They are, whether it's music or visual art or that kind of thing.
The way I'm picturing what you're talking about is being able to see those things using critical thinking, beyond what the masses are looking at, and then presenting it in an art form as a manifested physical form or sound or whatever. That ability to look past through the dust and the fog and being able to present it to people. I think that's how I'm picturing what you're saying. Is that correct? Or?
Well, yeah, but the reality is many of our people are prepared to see the artistic manifestation of some of those problems, but they still hold back on trying to address resolution and fixes to it. And so I want to talk about some of that stuff. And, among the things that Matt has posted recently has to do with how much we almost become hypocritical when we cry foul about the appropriation of our culture by others, yet we appropriate the culture of others. And in fact, not just appropriate it. And we can talk about Christmas specifically, but we appropriate it in such a way that I saw that one meme that had a manger scene with Native people in it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm not sure who should be more offended by that. I'm not sure if a true blue Christian, white Christian, should be offended that we went and stuck Native people in their manger scene. I mean, it would be an appropriation of their culture. Or should we be somewhat offended that somebody's done that? And yet, I know people who've got Native angels on their Christmas tree and pictures of what was the other one you had? It had a halo.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Was it like an old art form?
Old style, yeah. Anyway,
yeah.
of a Native and like a father and son or mother and child, almost like a Mary and Jesus kind of thing with halos over them and
not the circle kind, the aura kind of.
Yeah, not the halo, like the ring standing above the head, like like on a can't believe it's butter commercial or something like that. But no, I mean it's so. I mean those things, and from a Native perspective, I mean I think the idea of saying, oh no, we're trying to diversify and reach out to across cultures and stuff like that. Really, are you? And so this is kind of what I would say as a superficial example of what we're talking about. But when you realize what is happening there, how do you justify when we're suggesting that their culture, when they want to use Pocahontas as a Halloween costume, and we want to cry foul about appropriation, yet we have no problem sticking.
I've seen Native Santa Clauses.
Well, there you go. A Native Santa Claus,
and
angels, and it's the first time I've seen a nativity scene on a meme on Facebook that had Native people in it, and it's like, and of course we can get into then this opens up the whole can of worms where, and we've got plenty of people right local that'll start weighing in with the lost tribe of Israel and whether Christians or Jews, and were we really the first Christians? And I've heard what was the one argument somebody was making that the Ganoida was really Jesus Christ, and that was demonstrated in one of Handsome Lake's visions. And of course, for me, I think it's all BS. And I know people can believe what they want to believe, but this is where beliefs are being handed down to people, and people are not applying critical thinking. And I'll give you another example. And this was the interesting one, because although I've heard it before, my buddy Ray Cook, from Akwesasne, former editor of Indian Country Today, posted he did a post on Facebook, and it said, he talked about our funerals process, and he said, during our funerals, we talk about that we have been given a certain number of days, like they were predetermined at birth, and he said, and there's some comfort in that, and I had to answer right away, because what is said in the language is essentially, we have lived all our days. That's the way it's been explained to me. Now, for some reason, and I've heard people interpret that as meaning we've been given a certain number of days by the Creator, predetermined, and and that we lived them all. And I had to take, I took exception to that. I said, that's not the way I understand it. I mean, the idea of saying that we've lived all of our days is not to say that we were prescribed a certain number of days. Because if that's the belief that you have, then you just validated suicide, drug abuse, unhealthy habits, living in Love Canal if need be, or you've just murder, all of this stuff. I mean, you've just justified it, because if you believe that, whether you're Christian, whether you're Handsome Lake, whether you're, or whether you're Longhouse, if somehow you've interpreted that expression that we say at a funeral, that such and such who has passed has lived all their days, as meaning they were only prescribed a certain number of days, then what you've just said is that people are going to die anyway. It doesn't matter what they do. And when I said that, what Ray Cook's immediate response back to me was, good point. I mean, he took it and didn't. I mean, we could have debated it a little bit, and I said that's not the way it was explained to me. I mean, that expression. So this is where, again, critical thinking applies, because I've heard. I mean, look, I don't want to tell somebody who just lost somebody to a murder or to a suicide or an overdose, and tell that person, they were going to die anyway. That day, because they were only given so. No, I don't believe that for a second. And any culture, including my own, if it advocates that, I'm still going to reject it. Because to suggest that we are not responsible for certain elements of our life, and to suggest that if just today we decide that we're going to shut our lights off, then that was going to happen anyway. No, I'm sorry. I'm just not going to accept that. I think we have a responsibility, and there are things that are within our control. There's a reason to try to live a healthy life. There's a reason to try to give your children a healthy life. But if you believe that some man in the sky only gave you a certain number of days, I mean, then are you going to justify that child who is abused, who lost their life to either bad parents or whatever else? I mean, are you going to say that all of those deaths are justified? I mean, I have the same problem when somebody who is a devout Christian says, well, God wanted them. No, I don't accept that. I don't accept that God decided that, that somebody should die in the birth canal, or that a child should breathe only a couple of lives of breath before they pass on. I don't accept the fact that some rapist who rapes and murders a child was doing God's work. I mean, and that's to me, again, this is where critical thinking has to be applied. And I think we have to reject this notion that that inevitability can be justification for inactivity. And I'll take it another step farther. I'm looking at, look, it's not our election, and I get that, but tomorrow there's an election in Alabama where a whole lot of white people are going to vote for a child molester. And they know it. They know he's a child molester. In fact, some, including the governor of the state of Alabama, said, "Well, I believe the women who've come forward, and I believe they're credible. I believe what they're saying is true, but I'm going to vote for the guy anyway, because of political expediency." I mean, they are going to look the other way on the fact that this Roy Moore, was at 30 years old, was trying to make it with 14-year-olds, and they're okay with that. And in fact, even if they aren't okay with it, they're okay with it enough that they'll ignore that. And they'll say, yeah, but he's pro-life. Yeah, he's pro-life. I mean, this is the bizarre world that we live in.
But I've seen some of the rationale on that. It was saying that in Alabama it was legal to marry at 13 and 14 years old. That he wasn't out of bounds of what the law was in Alabama.
Well, consent had to be 15 years old at the time, and he was already. But I mean, how is that okay?
And the one video that I seen that says that back in the day, again, we're talking about back in the day in the 50s, I guess the good old days
when America was great.
America was great. A family would be honored that if a senator came up to their daughter,
prosecutor in that case, but yeah, okay,
or whoever he was, whatever political body he was, and they would feel honored that he was looking at their daughter, and looking to give her a good life.
And I don't disagree that there are people in the South who would hold those views.
Yeah, that was the law. That was the popular thinking.
Okay, but no place else in the country, could you do this. So that's my point, is that you have a people in a state, in Alabama, who, knowing, and even by today's standards, knowing that what he did was wrong, believing that his accusers are credible, would still rather have a child molester who shares some of their political views, in spite of the fact that the guy may be morally bankrupt. And this is again the refusal to apply critical thinking. Because if you have somebody who is devoid of morality, how can you think he's going to make the right moral judgments, even on legislation? Yet, because they are so hell-bent about being on the right, and these lines that have been drawn, I mean, look, and Democrats have their own problems. I mean, Democrats will cry foul now, but look how many even defended Bill Clinton when he was obviously using his position and power to seduce an intern in the Oval Office. I mean, again, where is the public's critical thinking on this stuff? And of course, I want to bring it back home to us. I mean, because this is part of the debate that needs to be had. When we think about who we are as a people and what our history is, and what is the history how we have been impacted by American politics, American military, American courts, American policy, and then we can go back to even prior to the United States. But when you consider all that stuff, how is it we still have so many people who are patriotic to the very country that not only oppresses them still, but killed their family members, wiped out, 90% of the population of native people, maybe 95%. I mean, and did so in the most egregious ways possible. I talked about the Sand Creek Massacre here, which with the anniversary was just a couple of weeks ago. I've talked about that stuff. But we haven't even begun to talk about some of the real atrocities that took place at places like residential schools. Murders and rapes, abuses, sexual abuses, physical abuses, psychological abuses, the things that went on for 100 freaking years. I mean, we're not even talking about a policy that, that seemed right for a given time, which it never is, by the way. Slavery was never right. It was legal, but it was never right. Massacring Native people was never right. It might have been legal. In fact, you get paid bounties for scalps. Didn't make it right. It was just legal. And when you think about, for 100 years, the genocide represented, just by this idea of a school or a series of schools in the U.S. and Canada and Australia and Africa, I might add, this idea of ripping children away from, actually breaking multiple generational ties. I mean, destroying the father-son, mother-daughter relationship, destroying the relationship with aunts and uncles and grandparents by ripping that apart, and then abusing those children and conditioning those children in such a way that they would not be able to exhibit warmth and nurturing to their own children or their grandchildren. And that's the world we live in. And yet, all of our people who know of this history, we still have a huge percentage of our population. I don't want to say most, but a significant percentage of our population that get all patriotic. They'll hang American flags outside their. I mean, I don't know a single native territory. I don't know a single tribal government, U.S. or Canada, that doesn't fly an American or Canadian flag in front of the building.
You don't know Ganyange?
Well, again, I'm talking about the Fed-rect tribes. I mean, Ganyange, is an anomaly because it was created only by us. It was recreated only by our people. Mm-hmm. But Ganyange is the only example of a community. But of course, they don't have a tribal administration building. I'm not saying they don't have, offices at their facility, but again, when you talk about a band council, a tribal council, a federally recognized tribe, I don't know a single one of them that doesn't have an American flag flying outside their buildings or a Canadian flag flying outside their buildings. That is a level of indoctrination and a level of complicity, because by doing that, you've accepted your station in life with the United States and with Canada. I mean, I suggested multiple times over the several years that until the United States fully recognizes, just the basic things that they wrote in the treaties that they waved in front of us and said are legit, like Canandaigua, until they want to recognize that Seneca territory is not a part of the United States, I'd take that flag down and I'd say, look, I'm not gonna burn it. I'm gonna throw it in the trash. I'm gonna fold it up. I'm gonna put it in one of your little special boxes. And when you can give us the due respect that we that is right, then we can hang your flag as an ally. But right now, you're still treating us in a very oppressive manner. And yet, if you suggest that to some people, that seems like a terrible thing, just a terrible thing. It seems, a complete, lack of respect. It's disrespectful. It's unpatriotic. Well, I think respect is the issue. But again, where's the critical thinking? Where's the thoughts that should go into what this relationship should be between any of our territories and state government or federal government or any other government for that matter, or any other entity? I think this is what's missing in all this stuff. I mean, if you really want to examine our history and examine our culture, I look, there's nothing wrong with who we were before, America was called America, before our land was called America. There was nothing wrong with who we were. And in fact, we're allowing our identity be defined by somebody else other than us. Again, whether it's the mascot issue, trying to make us this warlike. This warlike characteristic. I think I get back to this thing about warriors versus soldiers. And I don't know how many times, and this is even something that gets mischaracterized, when people talk about the fact that Native people enlist at a higher rate than any other group. It's per capita, first off. Let's be clear. Native people do not represent the largest percentage of the American Armed Forces. No, it's not even close. We only represent 0.7% of the U.S. population. That's what our numbers on the American side would equate to, is less than 1%, only 0.7% of the American population. In the military, Native people do represent almost 2% of the overall personnel, enlisted personnel, which is obviously 2% of the Native population, of the military population, is significantly higher than 0.7% of the American population. So, no, we enlist at a high rate. But every time that question gets raised, we hear the same thing. Oh, it's because of that warrior culture. As if our people, even still today, like we've got this killer gene in us or something. Like we are predisposed to kill people. And that's why our people enlist in the armed forces. And of course, it's not true. We don't have a warrior gene in us. We don't have this insatiable appetite to kill and be involved in war. We are not warlords. We are not even warlike. Most of our cultures are more based on peace and preserving peace and protecting peace and sometimes enforcing peace than being at war. Yet we will allow Native people. I've heard Native people give that explanation as to why Native people, why we enlist at a high rate.
The invisible warrior, the ones that can disappear and levitate.
Oh yeah, we're spooky, and yeah, we what we're gonna do, ghost dance, so we're bulletproof and invisible. Yeah.
Well, that actually was one of our strengths that we had when explorers came here. They feared us already before they even got here.
Yeah, because we understood things like camouflage long before white people. This whole idea of not marching in lines with red jackets on. Yeah, we're relatively
Single
invisible to people wearing blue coats and red coats. Yeah, we and feathers in our, white feathers coming out of our
Plumes?
big plumes coming out of our top hats or something. No, I mean, yeah, by those standards, we were absolutely invisible.
Playing a drum.
Yeah.
We're over here.
Yeah, if you can't see me, let me beat a drum so you can hear me. No, absolutely, we were quite invisible compared to them. But again, thinking about this, I mean, even when you look at the time frame, they massacred Lakota at Wounded Knee in 1890. When World War I would break out at the turn, just after the turn of the century, and I would argue there were already Native people enlisting with the U.S. Army, even as they were helping them kill Native people. I mean, there were Native scouts, and this is where Crow get the bad name they get from some of the other Native territories. There were Native scouts right alongside, George Custer, and right alongside, the guys, going into massacre at Wounded Knee. But certainly, I would imagine there were probably Native people right alongside American forces, or probably with American forces, going in to oppress the Philippines, and and occupy Hawaiian Islands and Cuba. I mean, all these places. But certainly, Native people started enlisting en masse in large numbers during the first war with Germany, and by World War II, there were some estimates that Native people represented double digits in the percentages of U.S. armed forces. There was a time, and I saw something that said there was only 4,000 enlisted men, and then after Pearl Harbor, it went up to 24,000. There was a five-fold increase in the number of Native people after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, and yet our people still should have had fresh in our memories then that their grandparents were killed by the same military that they were going to represent with their uniform. I don't know. This is where not only the cognitive dissonance comes in, but this idea that we will not apply real critical thinking to some of that decision making and the rationale associated with it. Hey, look, we're at the bottom of the hour, so let me take a break here. I'll catch my breath here and see if we got any comments on Facebook at the same time. We'll take a break and we'll be right back. This is John Kane. This is Let's Talk Native.
Back in Spain 500 years ago, old Chris Columbus lived. Told Isabella that the world was round. She thought he'd flipped his lid. He bugged the queen so much she finally said, okay, I'll give you 3 ships and some men. He said, I'll find a brand new route to India. I soon be home again. In 1492, who found who? 1492,
found who? Yeah, that's a good question. Hey, before we get into it, let me thank my sponsors. I want to thank Ross and Holly John and the RJE family of businesses, ERW and Eric White and ERW Enterprises. Good friends like Ed Schindler and Cynthia Trice and Neville Spring, Sugar Montour, and the Seneca Nation for supporting the program. And I want to thank many others who have helped this program continue to educate, entertain, and inform over the last 7 years. Even those who were no longer necessarily participating in supporting the show, the fact that you did then allowed us to get into our 8th year, and I thank you all for joining in the fight and doing your part. I also want to thank Unity Stream and Apache RadioNet, for providing our streaming service, and I want to thank CKWE for both the simulcast and the rebroadcast, as well as Netroots Radio, Real People's Media, and Indigenous Resistance Radio for carrying our program. I also want to thank all those who share the program, and sharing can be done in so many different ways. Obviously, you can share the Facebook stream even after the fact because it'll stay up on our page. But also, we post it on SoundCloud, so the audio is available there. We also take the video, clean it up a little bit, and we put it on our YouTube channel, which is Let's Talk Native TV. And from time to time, we'll also post other videos on there beyond just the show videos. So I recommend that you check out our channel and subscribe to it. Because if you do subscribe to it, then you will have an opportunity to get notifications anytime we post a new video. So by all means, do that. I would greatly appreciate it. You know, I made chili yesterday, and so
me too.
yeah. every once in a while, it revisits
Plus you're
me.
drinking that Pepsi over there.
Yeah, that doesn't help either. Yeah, absolutely. All right, so again, as per our conversation in the first half of the show, look, I'm not saying that we have to be filled with spite and anger and hostility over the history, but I think to persevere, to really be to be what I would really qualify as survivors of oppression, we have to continue to exist to be the people who face that oppression, not the ones who conceded to it, not the ones who submitted to it, and not the ones who now find themselves loyalists to, we even have native Trump fans. I mean, that sounds bizarre to me, but the fact of the matter is, a lot of these guys who are these uber patriots. I mean, I got into it a little bit on Facebook with somebody who's trying to justify even Trump's effort to reduce the two national monuments, the Escalade at the Grand Canyon and Bears Ears, saying, well, all of our land has been commercialized and all of it. Yeah. So the few pieces that we have left and the fight that we put to preserve some of those lands and leave some of those lands pristine, we should just concede it all. And yet there are people that'll justify that. I mean, I showed you before the show, Matt, a post that somebody put up about some naval guy in the Navy who says his grandfather was Apache, so he considers himself native. Sounds a little bit like Elizabeth Warren to me, but regardless, he says, and some people think it's a disgrace that I'm a native person, I'm enlisted in the U.S. military, and then goes on to call people down, call people cowards for not doing what he's done. Look, first off, if you enlist in the largest military industrial complex on the planet, one that spends 28 times more than any other country on weaponry, one that that dominates the globe, that's a pretty easy gig. Stand with the Palestinians and see. Then we can talk about how brave you are. Stand with people who have been standing up to the oppression of the United States for 200 years, not strap their uniform on. So when I listen to these guys want to talk about how brave they are by enlisting in the U.S. military, look, do what you're going to do. But the idea of calling people down for saying and calling those of us who would never do such a thing cowards, that's I'm not going to remain silent on that. I'm not going to applaud your bravery for enlisting, wearing the uniform of the bully, of the global bully, the nation that dropped atomic weapons on innocent people. a nation that invaded territory after territory after territory. If any other country in the world decided to have a military presence the way the United States did, the United States would cry foul. And they would say, yeah, but we're the good ones. And the fact that our people will enlist in the U.S. Armed Forces, ignoring the history of the U.S. military against Native people, against their own people, is still incredible to me. And that's the level of complicity and assimilation that's wreaked havoc on us. And so today, as we're raising our children and our grandchildren, I had my grandson today tell me a teacher called him disrespectful today in school. I said, for what? Because I wouldn't put my hand on my heart during the Pledge of Allegiance. I said, you tell that teacher you call me. Just the idea, the nerve of some white teacher to tell my grandson that he was being disrespectful because he won't put his hand on his heart during the Pledge of Allegiance. You want to talk about indoctrination? Is there anything that is more indoctrinating than teaching a 4-year-old and a 5-year-old to say words they have no idea what they mean, just to recite them and memorize, and then grade them on it? I remember when I was in kindergarten, we had to learn the lyrics, the words to the Star Spangled Banner, and we wouldn't get a passing grade until we did it. That's incredible. And the idea that today, in 2017, a teacher would tell a Native kid in a school district that has a lot of Native children in it that they are being disrespectful because they won't put their hand on their heart during the Pledge of Allegiance. And you know what? I know there's plenty of Native people out there that say, well, that damn kid should do it. And so there we are. This is kind of where we are. Because here's the thing, and this is where I wanted to go with some of this conversation. This failure to apply critical thinking based on who we are, who we really are, what our history is, what our culture is, and not what it has become. Because we can get into a debate. Does that culture exist anymore? We can get into that debate, and frankly, I'm not sure I'll win that argument. But if we refuse to apply that stuff, then what are we telling our children? What are we telling our grandchildren? As we face issues today that may be even in many ways worse than what our grandparents, great-grandparents, and great-great-grandparents faced. And I know, I realize I'm comparing the days of massacres and our children being stripped away from us to today. Does that even compare? Well, I'm not comparing it today. I'm comparing it what tomorrow might be. Because I've said it before, I honestly think that there is some major conflicts coming down the pike in the United States. Obviously, we look at some of what's happening politically, the divide between right and left and white and black and, conservative and liberal and, male and female, all of that stuff. The divides are getting more and more aggressive. So there's that unrest. Then there's the potential for economic chaos. What's a Bitcoin going for these days?
A lot.
I don't even know what a Bitcoin represents, but I know that it's trading for like $20,000 or something like that. Almost. I think the last I saw it was $18,000, but they said it was going to hit $20,000 mark.
And it's heading towards 35 real quick.
And that's not even a real currency. It's a virtual currency. So what does that say about the real currency? How is it becoming so devalued against something like this? And what happens when that real currency crashes? Because what is it based on? Well, that's a good question. But one thing is for sure, that the global economy is operating more on credit than on anything of value. And you know what? Credit doesn't necessarily. If somebody ever called the notes on some of these bills, the economy would crash.
Current rate is $16,859.
Okay, all right. So, like I said, I knew it was between 16 and 18, but no, it's heading to 20 is what we hear. But regardless, So there's that, and of course there's global conflict. I mean, now you've got Donald Trump recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital, and that's caused violence worldwide.
What's the meme? Palestine identified Dallas as the capital of Mexico.
Yeah, and I heard somebody was going to identify Moscow as the capital of the United States. Yeah, that one seemed appropriate. I mean, it is the potential for global conflict. I mean, obviously there is global conflict, and there has been global conflict continuously. And of course, in spite of the United States having this global world domination in terms of military presence everywhere, 110 countries, they have active military. 110 countries.
It's all built on credit, though. That's the thing.
Well, and the problem is if they're suggesting that this military presence is about peace, well, it ain't working, folks.
China's looking to cash in pretty damn quick. I know that.
Well, so then there's that, and of course, I haven't even talked about the climate and what man has done to that. I mean, obviously, California. Some of those images out of California, it almost seems like the houses are burning much better than the trees are now. So there you have it. I mean, you've got environmental chaos playing out. I mean, I saw the picture of the starving polar bear up there in Alaska, and rising sea levels. You've got fiercer storms. You've got longer droughts. You've got more flooding. I mean, all of this stuff. I mean, so and the point for me mentioning all this, we're not the ones who are going to be called upon to solve the problems caused by this stuff. Our kids are, and our grandkids are. And what are we doing to prepare them?
We got to start. We had the responsibility to start getting the history out there a little stronger, I would say, because they say history repeats itself if it's been hidden. So I think we had the responsibility to start telling more history of like how you.
It is repeating itself, and the worst part about it is the oppressed line up with the oppressors. And that's where, when I think about a Native person enlisting in the U.S. military to go to Iraq or Afghanistan or any place, Syria, to involve themselves in their conflict. Look, make no mistake about it. The U.S. military if you enlist in the U.S. military, you are not defending freedom. You are not defending somebody's democracy or somebody's right to free speech.
When's the last time the average person has actually voted in anything?
Yeah, I mean the percentage of people who decide in U.S. elections.
It's not a democracy.
Even if you take the trumped up, no pun intended, numbers that are associated with the final general election, the people who decide, the numbers that decide who makes the ballot in those general elections is far smaller than the people who come out on that final day. And that final day is still less than 50% of the population. So, and it's not even the majority that decides that. I mean, Hillary Clinton got 2 or 3 million more votes than Donald Trump did. I mean, the whole thing is a debacle on so many different levels. Like I said, tomorrow, there's a good chance a child molester, a pervert, a guy devoid of morality is going to get voted in to the U.S. Senate in Alabama. And because Alabama is a red state. They vote Republican, usually between 20 and 30%. That's the margin that Republicans usually win in. Trump won in Alabama by 30%. It doesn't matter that he's twisted, that he's an ignorant, jackass. It doesn't matter that. It doesn't matter that he talks about grabbing women's genitalia or any of the things that people are currently being pushed out of office or out of employment in every place from the movie industry to entertainment and sports and CEOs and news. I mean, even NPR had to dump a couple of people. The Prairie Home Companion guy there had to, got dumped from NPR. I mean, it's incredible, and it's not incredible that this happened because that's the rape culture of the United States. But it's incredible that all of a sudden there seems to be some response to it, but that response it has its limits. The accusers that are going to come out against Donald Trump, he may become as Teflon as Bill Clinton was. We'll see. I guess time will tell with that. But I mean, this is again, I agree with you, Matt. We have to teach our kids this history. They have to know the ugly side of it. And, so I've got to explain to my grandson, no, you don't have to pledge allegiance to the United States. In fact, it's absurd that a school would actually encourage children to make a political statement like that. Children to make political statements like that. I mean, it's
what do they call it? Forced allegiance or forced patriotism?
Yeah, it's forced patriotism, and it is literally there's only one word for it, and it's indoctrination. It's the same thing that somebody would have said when you see a whole bunch of little white German kids, putting their hand up for Adolf Hitler. I mean, it's the exact same process. So, I mean, you're right. We've got to. The schools aren't going to do it. I mean, the schools aren't. They're still teaching the same BS. I mean, if you open up a history book in any grade in the elementary, if they have a section on Jamestown, the Jamestown colony in Virginia, they're still saying that Pocahontas, as a child, 8 years old, saved John Smith's life. And that is just pure BS. It never happened. In fact, the story was invented by John Smith after Pocahontas actually died. She wasn't even Pocahontas anymore. They'd stripped her of her name and her culture, and she was Lady Rebecca. But you know what? She was a popular figure, this native princess, as they called her in Europe. And so John Smith made this crap up, and it makes it in the history books, and it's still there. Even no matter how many times it's been debunked, this is the way they teach American history. When they cover natives, they teach about us being in the past, as relics of the past, like we're not here anymore. I mean, and when there is some historical mention of something like code talkers, they mischaracterize that as well. Or if they any native person who has played a role or a significant role in American history, they whitewash the role. I mean. It's sad, but Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull, or Geronimo and Sitting Bull, were paraded out in front of white people for Wild West shows, for presidential inaugurations. I mean, and those are the pictures you could find. I mean, is anybody going to teach what they really stood for through most of their life? And I don't care what somebody's final words are. I mean, I want to know what somebody did with their life. And these guys were examples of resistance. I hope to hell that that I have my wits about me on my dying days, and that I don't say, decide that or let somebody try to bury me in a Christian funeral or something like that. Man, if that happens, I'm going to wake up from the dead, I swear. But I mean, when I think about people who stood up strong, I mean, Red Jacket stood up strong against drinking and against Christianity. Yet, in his final days, he was a drunk. And he conceded because his wife already had to Christianity. I mean, that's tough. That's tough to take. And I don't want to. I mean, I don't want to remember Red Jacket that way. I want to remember Red Jacket as the one who stood up and said, no, we're not going to allow you to set up a Christian mission on Seneca territory. One of the greatest speeches to come from a Seneca, speaker. It's actually one of the easiest speeches to find. Red Jacket's addressed to Christian missionaries. But the sad part is, he was rapidly becoming in the minority as far as people resisting the religion being imposed on our territories. I mean, that's the sad part. And today, as we run up to December 25th, Tegarundege's birthday, I might add. Only he could be that defiant, right? As we run up to December 25th, Native people, even the ones who are not Christian, are going to demonstrate themselves more complicit in the dominant culture than not. And look, I don't have a problem with people having turkey on Thanksgiving Day, but just don't buy into the happy little pilgrims and happy little Indians thing. And I don't have a problem if somebody wants to give a gift on, even if it's a Redskins shirt. If somebody wants to give a gift, a Christmas gift, or a gift for the season. Look, somebody wants to say happy holidays. Look, that's fine, and I appreciate the sentiment. But
that was for Hanukkah, by the way.
oh, okay, thanks. But I don't celebrate holidays, holy days. You know, and in fact, I find it hard to place more value on one day over another because what, a government or a religion told you to? You know, it's kind of like the whole thing about land. I mean, sacred sites. I don't know. Look, I'll be the first one to admit there are places that are more beautiful than others. I mean, just visually, aesthetically, you know, more enticing than others. But in terms of the sacredness of land, I don't know that any part is more sacred than another. You know, again, if you refer to the earth as our mother, you know, I don't know that you can suggest that one part is more sacred than the other. So, I mean, when I think about each day that creation has provided us the opportunity to enjoy through our birth and through all that creation provides for us. You know, I have a birthday coming up too, but is that day more important than the day before or the day after it? I don't know. I mean, look, I appreciate the sentiment, you know, but having said that,
you go to Denny's, it is.
Oh, do you get something special on
your
your
free meal?
I think you go to the casino in your birth month. You can get
cash it in.
You know, you can get what do they call it? Some free plays or something like that.
Oh, yeah, match play.
Match play. Yeah, I've never done it, but I heard that. But again, you know, the idea of celebrating one day over another. Look, we pick periods of the year to acknowledge creation and to give thanks to not just each other, but to our communities, and to acknowledge, you know, the bounty that is creation. And it's less about the day than what we teach each other and what we learn from each other, and the social aspect of what those ceremonies or festivals are about. But, you know, when people get hung up on the day, like because a certain day is more sacred, and to not do something on a certain day is sacrilegious, you know, I don't know. It's kind of a bizarre concept in many ways. So, look, I mean, I know we rambled on for an hour here, but my point is we need to apply critical thinking to our existence here. And part of that does require that we have some education about history and our culture. Like I said, that little exchange between me and Ray Cook about those words said at a funeral, and I'll tell you, we've had a lot of funerals in the last couple of weeks. So that expression, when people say that person has lived all their days, man, I think we have to think about what that really means. And if you don't know, ask. But I have heard people, and I've heard people who are claimed to be culturally savvy and knowledgeable, and who have said that means that the Creator provided us with a specific number of days. Well, you know, again,
that's
this
like Logan's Run from the 70s.
Yeah,
you reach the age of 38 or something like that, and they kill you. It was a science fiction movie.
Well, and man could do that, and that had nothing to do with creation or some man in the sky. But the idea that you know, like somehow it's stamped on our foreheads at birth that which day we're going to die, and that only the Creator knows it, and however we take that path, like it didn't matter, we're going to die. No, again, this is where critical thinking. We have to think more critically. We have to be open-minded, but we also have to use reason and clear thought on what something means, because I have heard misinterpretation of things from our culture that have a tendency to get run on, and then the run that people take with an expression or a concept can oftentimes be the complete opposite of what it was intended to mean in the first place. So, yes, our culture does need to be learned, and our history needs to be learned. And more importantly, we have to have a stronger sense for what it is our future holds for us. And for those of you who think our future is only bound by us being Americans or Canadians, well, that's the future that you decided for, not the one that the rest of us did. Look, this is John Kane. This is Let's Talk Native. We'll be back here on Friday, and of course, I'll be in New York on Thursday morning. So catch me on WBAI.org, or we will web stream that. We'll web stream that live stream on Facebook. That is that show. And that's Thursday morning from 10 till noon. So I'll look forward to catching up with you then as well. We'll see you. Yahweh.
Yeah.
Trying to cross the border to the good old USA. Man said, where you come from, boy? How long you gonna stay? I said, I'm from the Six Nations and Reserve. Don't know when I'm coming back. He said, I'll have to see your Indian cop. I said, why don't you tell me, Jack? Where's your white man's car? Prove to me that you ain't black. Where's your white man's car? Sir, please get off my back. I don't have no bow and arrow. That don't mean I wanna attack. I went uptown to the drugstore just to buy a pair of shades. The man behind the counter said that'll be $15.98. I said, I don't have to pay no tax on that. He said, oh, not one of you